All right, I don't know when it stopped recording, but okay, we're gonna watch the sunset while I read Evelyn Underhill, Mysticism. I came to the beach and I'm parked sideways so that we could do this, right? There. That way people won't be in it, and then you can still get the sunset. The ocean's right over there. I just showed it, but I don't know if I'll go back and edit that part in. Look at this. It's awesome. Okay. All right, so welcome. I hope you're gonna get that. All right. I'll turn it back towards me, you know when, later. So welcome. I think we're on a new chapter, if I remember correctly. I always want to get closer, but then I'm like, is that just the part of us? Is that just the part of us that always thinks we have and have more, you know? It's so pretty, you guys. I put my... All right, I think I figured out a way to do this. I didn't think this all the way through beforehand, but let's just start with the book. Because this might be a podcast too, I let it be. And so if it's that, then they don't really care what we're looking at, right? They're just like, why aren't you reading the book already? That's what I was thinking, is just do this backwards on the chair. Look at that. Okay. There's the sun setting, right? We'll get that between the two palm trees. That's awesome. Okay, yeah, we're on chapter 6. Called, of the second half, right? We're on chapter 6 of the second half of the book, which is The Mystic Way. Sorry if this is making noise. There we go. Now that my necklace is on it. All right. And so I showed this on the end of the last, but I'll show it here. I always show this part, so you can take a screenshot of this part if you want. And then we'll go back to the sunset. Because I go over, she goes over what's going to be in this chapter. So it's on introversion and recollection. Oh, introversion. Part 1, recollection and quiet. Thank God. Introversion is the characteristic mystic art. Its development and accompanies organic growth. It is susceptible of education, the value of tradition, the training of will and attention, contemplation, the only real way of perceiving anything. That's awesome. Its method described, an experiment, introversion, ecstasy, the two aspects of contemplative consciousness, the ground of the soul, philosophic contemplation, the degrees of horizon, their nature, the end of contemplation, Hilton, naked horizon, all stages or degrees of horizon, arbitrary and diagrammatic, but some division essential to description. 3 stages, recollection, quiet, contemplation, horizon grows with the growing self. The discipline of the mind, disciplines the mind, will, and heart. Oh, good. Saint Teresa, degrees of horizon. It is a progress in love, a retreat from circumference to center. Its end is union. Recollection, a different process. Boheme, meditation, its characteristics, it develops into recollection. A spiritual gymnastics. Saint Teresa, quiet, its characteristics, largely inexpressible. Suspension of thought, its development from recollection. It is a state of humility. Its nature described. Two aspects of quiet, positive and negative. Eckhart, Evelyn Underhill's always talking about Meister Eckhart when she says Eckhart. Because this was written in 1910, y'all. The Epistle of Private Counsel, Saint Teresa, quiet and quietism, the danger zone of introversion, Ruysbrook on quietism, its evils. It is a perversion of truth. Oh, that's good. I really want to understand that. I wanted to earlier. Molinos, von Hegel, the distinguishing mark of true quiet. Madame Guyon, quiet is a transitional state. Okay, so let's start. I don't need this giant jacket if I'm not going to be... I was going to be outside. I'll just let you see the sun over the ocean. That's the ocean. It's so beautiful. I invite you to just be quiet now. Get in the quiet. Oh, good. I'll just leave my jacket there. That way. It'll block some of the cars. Okay. In our study of the first mystic life, its purification and illumination, we have been analyzing and considering a process of organic development, an evolution of personality. This may be called differently, either a movement of consciousness towards higher levels or a remaking of consciousness, consequent on the emergence and growth of a factor which is dormant in ordinary man. Okay, I hope she goes into this more. I'm going to face the sunset too because I don't want to miss it because I'm reading. I mean, I guess I'll be looking down anyway at the book. Okay, I can't pull this off with my mic. All right. I feel like singing so much right now, but it's a little bit of a rough day before this. But that's okay. It's no complaints. Maybe she'll get into it, but I was thinking of this idea of like, I wonder what it's like to just invite God into everything. Invite God into the difficult day, invite God into the fun days, what we consider fun, Look at this sun setting. Okay. Now I burned my eyes, so I can't see what's on the page. All right. Either a movement of consciousness towards higher levels or remaking of consciousness consequent on the emergence of growth, or of a factor which is dormant in ordinary man, but destined to be supreme in its full-grown mystic type, We have seen the awakening of this factor, this spark of the soul, with its innate capacity for apprehending the absolute. We have seen it attack and conquer the old sense-fed and self-centered life of the normal self and introduce it into a unique universe lit up by the uncreated light. These were the events which, taken together, constituted the first mystic life, a complete round upon the spiral road which leads from man to God. When What we have been looking at then is a life process, the establishment of a certain harmony between the self and reality. And we have discussed this life process rather as if it contained no elements which were not referable to natural and spontaneous growth, to the involuntary adjustments of the organism to that extended or transcendental universe of which it gradually becomes aware. But side by side with this organic growth goes a specific kind of activity which is characteristic of the mystic, a form under which his consciousness works best and his awareness of the infinite is enriched and defined. Already once or twice we have been in the presence of this activity, have been obliged to take its influence into account, as were we studying other artistic types. We could not leave the medium in which they work wholly on one side. Contemplation is the mystic's medium. It is to him, or her, that which harmony is to the musician, form and color to the artist, measure to the poet, the vehicle by which he can best apprehend the good and beautiful. So contemplation is our medium, it's like the painter uses paint. We use contemplation. That's what that guy John Butler says. He's like, all I've been doing is meditating 2 times a day. He didn't even say how long. One evening, he does the Jesus prayer for the last 30-something years. In which he can best apprehend the good and the beautiful, enter into communion with the real, with a capital R. As voice or vision is the way in which his transcendental consciousness presents its discoveries to the surface mind, like we talked about in the last chapter, so contemplation is the way in which it makes these discoveries, perceives the suprasensible. The growth of his effective genius, therefore, is connected with his growth in this art, and that growth is largely conditioned by education. The painter, however great his natural powers may be, can hardly dispense with some technical training. The musician is wise if he acquaint himself at least with the elements of counterpoint. So too the mystic. It is true that he sometimes seems to spring abruptly to the heights, to be caught into ecstasy without previous preparation, as a poet may startle the world by a sudden masterpiece. But unless they be backed by discipline, these sudden and isolated flashes of inspiration will not long avail for the production of great works. Ordina quest amore, o tu che m'ami, is the one imperative demand made by goodness, truth, and beauty. Okay, so what does that mean? I think that's Italian, right? She didn't write it. Ordinary quest of love, of you, from my friend, tu che mi ami. Oh, well, that's the one imperative demand made, and so feel free, I always say that. Oh, it's behind a palm tree now, right? Or did it? Oh, no, it went down. It went down behind the sea. That's what happened to the sun. Is the one imperative demand made by goodness, truth, and beauty, by every aspect of reality upon the human soul. Lover and philosopher, saint, artist, and scientist must alike obey or fail. I want to know what it means. Quest amor. It's the ordinary quest of love. On you, my friend. Anyway, my love, mi ami, mi ame. Anyway, transcendental genius, then, obeys the laws which govern all forms of genius, in being susceptible of culture, and indeed cannot develop its full powers without an educative process. All right, I'm gonna I'm gonna go with you guys. Well, like, I want to go on a time. Let's go in was anyone honking when the sun just set at the ocean, right? There's no need for that. There's so many spaces over there. Okay. So, transcendental genius then obeys the laws which govern all other forms of genius in being susceptible of culture, and indeed cannot develop its full powers without an educative process of some kind. This strange art of contemplation, which the mystic tends naturally to practice during the whole of his career, which develops step by step with his vision and his love, demands of the self which undertakes it the same hard, dull work, the same slow training of the will, which lies behind all supreme achievement, and is the price of all true liberty. Wow, all true freedom comes from this discipline. Can you imagine? Even Christ, he lived his whole life. And he had to face the death on the crucifix. That's what I was just contemplating. On the cross. Excuse me. It is the want of such training, such supersensual drill, which is responsible for the mass of vague, ineffectual, and sometimes harmful mysticism which has always existed, the dilute cosmic emotion and limp spirituality which hangs, as it were, on the skirts of the true seekers of the absolute, and brings discredit upon their science. I was watching a video like that for a second last night. I was like, no, I'm not meant to watch this. You be very discerning. Once they started talking about the source from which they got their information, like, no matter how cool the cover looked or the title, you're going to find all the answers for your spiritual life, and it's like, oh, wait a second, no. Look at the source of where they got this from. Anyway, in this, as in all the other and lesser arts which have been developed by the race, education consists largely in a humble willingness to submit to the discipline and profit by the lessons of the past. Tradition runs side by side with experience. The past collaborates with the present. I try to keep a very open mind and appreciate all sorts of wisdom. Like she talks about all sorts of different. This was people that were getting stuff from channeling or something. If you want me to make it clear, I don't know if I need to explain it, but I was just taught. Stay away from that. Okay, so each new and eager soul rushing out towards the only end of love passes on its way the landmarks left by others upon the pathway to reality. If it be wise, it observes them and finds in them rather helps towards attainment than hindrances to that freedom, which is the essence of the mystic act. This act, it is true, is in the last resort a solitary affair, the flight of the alone to the alone. That's a quote. The flight of the alone to the alone. There's nothing of social Christianity in that supreme adventure whereby God and the soul are made one thing. At the same time, here, as elsewhere, man cannot safely divorce his own personal history from that of the race. The best and truest experience does not come to the eccentric and individual pilgrim whose intuitions are his only law, but rather to him who submits personal intuition to the guidance afforded by the general history of the mystic type. Those who refuse this guidance do, as a fact, expose themselves to all the dangers which crowd about the individualist, from heresy, right, at one end of the scale to madness at the other. Vae soli, V-A-E. Nowhere more clearly than in the history of mysticism do we observe that the essential solidarity of mankind, the penalty paid by those who will not acknowledge it. Wow. I want to drive over by there now, because I'm parked sideways. I don't want to stay parked sideways. Now, the education which tradition has ever prescribed for the mystic consists in the gradual development of an extraordinary faculty of concentration, a power of spiritual attention. Okay, I'll talk about concentration while I drive then, because I know someone taught me about that. A mystic Christian taught this other man who taught me. And he said concentration, I'm gonna buckle just even for this parking lot. He said concentration is like, okay, so if you imagine, because this really helps, it helps me all the time I think about this. Imagine, and I'm not gonna look at the screen for a second. Imagine a magnifying glass, right? It's only gonna take a second, it's right here. A magnifying glass, and let's say it's a hot summer day. I grew up in Texas, so hot summer day, and if you have a magnifying glass on a leaf, like on a dry leaf, or a bunch of dry leaves, you can set the leaf on fire. And so I was taught concentration is like this. Okay, let me make sure I'm in the line. I am. I'll show you the view, right? Here we are, closer. Closer. I met the singer of that song. Anyway. It's the band Travis, that's who sings it. I was like, I couldn't remember who. Okay, so let's go back. So if you have the concentration, right? If you have I'm so happy to be done with the contemplation that I was just doing before this, because it was really quite painful. But I just chose to sit through it, I guess sometimes guitar practice or guitar lessons can be painful because they make you feel like an idiot, They don't make you, but you can do so. Anyway, because you're just trying something and you're so bad at it, you just feel really dumb if your childhood stuff comes up, right? But then you work through it and you're like, why ought I feel dumb at this? I don't know how to play these guitar chords. There's no shame in not knowing how to play something I've never been taught to play before, It's so, concentration. When you're concentrating, this is what I'm working on doing right now, right? You're staying focused. And when you bring your focus, like if I studied one guitar song for 4 hours in a day, I get really good at those chords and playing that song, right? And all of that concentration just on my guitar helped me play guitar better the rest of my life. And so if you take the sun's light and you concentrate the sunlight onto this leaf, it can create a fire, and you could create a whole bonfire, and you could, if back in the days when it was harder to like set fires, they would just keep one fire going, one person could watch the fire, but it's like keep a torch going so it could start the fire in the morning again, and you could cook your food and boil your water with that, and there's so much you can do, warm your whole family or the hut that you make or whatever with a fire. And so all of that comes from concentrating I mean, if you have like a glass or magnifying glass, but that's what our concentration does. That's what I was taught. Concentration, contemplation does. Okay, so now, okay, so now I'm going to read that sentence again. The education which tradition has ever prescribed for the mystic consists in gradual development of an extraordinary faculty of concentration, a power of spiritual attention. It is not enough that he should naturally be aware of the absolute, unless he be able to contemplate it, just as the mere possession of eyesight or hearing, however acute, needs to be supplemented by trained powers of perception and reception, if we are really to appreciate, see, or hear to any purpose the masterpiece of music or of art, like someone who learns how to taste wine. I want you guys to see this now. I think it's dark enough where you won't see people's faces. The ocean's just so vast. It's just so awesome to see the ocean, I think, All right, but I don't want to spend a long time messing with my camera again. One second, this is my high technological way to find out what you're seeing is I have this tiny mirror. And I can't even see what you're seeing. I can't tell. Oh well. I'll just put it back this way. I hope you enjoyed the ocean while you got to see it. Okay. It is not enough. Okay, so here we go. More nature herself. More. Okay, the purpose and masterpieces of music or of art. More. Nature herself reveals little of her secret to those who only look and listen with the outward ear and eye. The condition of all valid seeing and hearing upon every plane of consciousness lies not in the sharpening of the senses, but in a peculiar attitude of the whole personality, and a self-forgetting attentiveness, a profound concentration, a self-merging which operates a real communion between the seer and the seen. In a word, in contemplation. Contemplation is the word. Contemplation, then, is a power which we may and often must apply to the perception not only of divine reality, but of anything. It is a condition under which all things give up to us the secret of their life. All artists are of necessity in some measure contemplative. Innocence of eye is little else than this. And she has it in quote, innocence of eye, so maybe that's a term back in 1910. It talks about, how it's basically, it just seems like it's the starting over of, just acting like it's the first time you're seeing something. Not acting, just being present. I was contemplating on the way here. I heard this sentence the other day, no one can prove that all of the earth didn't show up here 10 minutes ago with all its memories built in it, or something like that, like a computer program. When you just start thinking of these things late at night. Here, I can do it like this. Innocence of eye is little else than this. and only by its means can they see truly those things which they desire to represent. I invite those to whom this statement seem a compound of cheap psychology and cheaper metaphysics to clear their minds of prejudice and submit this matter to an experimental test. Yea, if they will, be patient and honest, and unless they belong to that minority which is temperamentally incapable of the simplest contemplative act, they will emerge from the experiment possessed of a little new knowledge as to the nature of the relation between the human mind and the outer world. Okay, let's see what her experiment is for us, right? I haven't read this before. All that is asked is that we shall look for a little time in a special and undivided manner at some simple, concrete, and external thing. Okay, I'm going to turn this again so we can, there's a palm tree or the ocean or whatever else you're seeing, okay? Or seeing in your own room, okay? For a little time, in a special and undivided manner, at some simple, concrete, and external thing. This object of our contemplation may be almost anything we please: a picture, a statue, a tree, a distant hillside, a growing plant, running water, little living things. We need not, with Kant, go to the starry heavens. A little thing, the quantity of a hazelnut, will do for us, as it did for Lady Julian long ago. Remember, she saw all of the world in a hazelnut. Remember, it is a practical experiment on which we are set, not an opportunity of pretty and pantheistic meditation. Good. Look then at this thing which you have chosen. Willfully refuse the messages which countless other aspects of the world are sending, and so concentrate your whole attention on this one active sight, that all other objects are excluded from the conscious field. Do not think, I'm going to look at one too, but I'm going to read the directions first. Do not think, but as it were, pour out your personality towards it. Let your soul be in your eyes. Almost at once, this new method of perception will reveal unsuspected qualities in the external world. So let's just do that. I'll just do it for 2 minutes, right? Wherever you are, you can look on the screen at something or where you are at something. All right. Let's see what she had to say. Okay, so she said, first you will perceive about you a strange and deepening quietness. Next, you will become aware of a heightened significance, an intensified existence in the thing at which you look. I mean, we probably ought to have spent like 20 minutes doing that, right? As you, with all your consciousness, lean out towards it, an answering current will meet yours. It seems as though the barrier between its life and your own, between subject and object, has melted away. You are merged with it in an act of true communion, and you know the secret of its being deeply and unforgettably, yet in a way which you can never hope to express. Seen thus, a thistle has, a thorn, right? A thistle has celestial qualities, a speckled hen, a touch of the sublime. Our greater comrades, the trees. I was looking at that tree, right? I love trees. I did this long meditation with a tree once where it was just like what she just described. I'm not going to put words to it because it was amazing. Our greater comrades, the trees, the clouds, the rivers, initiate us into mighty secrets, flame out at us like shining from shook foil. The, quote, eye which looks upon eternity, end quote, has been given its opportunity. We have been immersed for a moment in the life of the all. A deep and peaceful love unites us with the substance of all things. A mystic marriage has taken place between the mind and some aspect of the external world. Corps ad corps, la quitter. Life has spoken to life. Oh, she translated, that's good. But not to the surface intelligence. That surface intelligence knows only that the message was true and beautiful, no more. See, the surface intelligence can't make sense of it. It really can't. And so it's like, let me see. If they don't turn their music off, I'll just think I have to move. Again. And so what she's saying, I was thinking Eckhart Tolle says the same thing when he says, if you go and you're outside, you look at a bird, you don't say it's a bird, you don't say it's a tree, because as soon as you name it, you put it in a box, you put it in a small box, and you're not knowing more about it. You're not interacting anymore. It's like as soon as you label me, that's where I'm finished. I forgot what that quote is like, but it's like, you stop knowing my essence. You stop knowing me. So she's saying, in that moment, you were immersed for a moment in the life of the all. The price of this experience has been a stilling of that surface mind, a calling in of all our scattered interests, an entire giving of ourselves to this one activity, without self-consciousness, without reflective thought. To reflect is always to distort. Our minds are not good mirrors. The contemplative is contented to absorb and be absorbed, and by this humble access, to attain to a plane of knowledge which no intellectual process can come near. And she quoted somewhere from Revelations of Divine Love. Now this simple experiment exercises on a small scale, and in regard to visible nature, the faculty by which the mystic apprehends invisible reality, enters into communion with the Absolute. It is one thing, of course, to see truthfully for an instant the flower in the crannied wall, another to bear the full blaze of eternal truth, true love, and loved eternity. Yet both, according to their measure, are functions of the inward eye operating in the suspension of the mind. All right, I'm going to move. This humble receptiveness, this still and steady gazing, in which emotion, will, and thought are lost and fused, is the secret of the great contemplative, on fire with love of that which he has been allowed to see. But whilst the contemplation of nature entails an outgoing towards somewhat indubitably external to us, the contemplation of spirit, as it seems to those who practice it, more often entails an ingoing or introversion of our faculties, a journey towards the center. The kingdom of God, they say, is within you. Seek it, then, in the most secret habitations of the soul. How do we do that? You know what I mean? The mystic then must learn so to concentrate all his faculties, his very self, upon the invisible and intangible, that all visible things are forgot, to bring it so sharply into focus that everything else is blurred. He must call in his scattered faculties, by a deliberate exercise of the will, empty his mind of its swarm of images, its riot of thought. In mystical language, he must sink into his nothingness, into that blank abiding place where busy, clever reason cannot come. Someone was talking about Noah's Ark today and how God told them what to put in it, all the animals, and then shut the door like nothing else could get in it, It's kind of a picture of this. Jesus says, when you pray, go into your inner room and shut the door. The whole of this process, this gathering up and turning inwards of the powers of the self, this gazing into the ground of the soul, is that which is called introversion. Okay, I said I was going to move, so I think I'm going to move because I like doing what I say. Even though, you can just be present with what is and wait, and not wait, but you're just seeing that it will change, because it does change, because forms always change. But also you can take action. Sometimes when you do that, it just, another thing like that happens, All right, there, just like 2 spots over. I don't need to overthink it. Excuse me, here. So she's talking about this introversion. Introversion is an art which can be acquired as gradually and as certainly by the born mystic as the art of piano playing can be acquired by the born musician. In both cases, it is the genius of the artist which makes his use of the instrument effective, but it is also his education in the use of the instrument which enables that genius to express itself in an adequate way. Such mystical education, of course, presumes a something that can be educated. The new birth, the awakening of the deeper self, must have taken place before it can begin. It is a psychological process and obeys psychological laws. There is in it no element of the unexpected or the supernatural. In its early stages, the practice of introversion is voluntary, difficult, and deliberate, as are the early stages of learning to read or write. But as reading or writing finally becomes automatic, so as the mystic's training in introversion proceeds, habits are formed, and those contemplative powers which he is educating, he or she just uses he for this because the soul is sometimes, she uses she, which he is educating, establish themselves amongst his normal faculties. Sometimes they wholly dominate these faculties, escape the control of the will, and appear spontaneously, seizing upon the conscious field. Such violent and involuntary invasions of the transcendental powers, when they utterly swamp the surface consciousness, and the subject is therefore cut off from his ordinary external world, constitute the typical experience of rapture or ecstasy. It is under the expansive formula of such abrupt ecstatic perception, not by gradual steps, but by sudden ecstatic flights, soaring aloft to the glorious things on high, that the mystical consciousness of divine transcendence is most clearly expressed. Those wide, exalted apprehensions of the Godhead, which we owe to the mystics, have been obtained, not by industrious meditation, but by a transcending of all creatures, a perfect going forth from oneself, by standing in an ecstasy of mind. Hence the experiences peculiar to these ecstatic states have a great value for the student of mystical science. It will be our duty to consider them in some detail in a later section of this book. The normal and deliberate practice of introversion, on the contrary, is tightly bound up with the sense of divine eminence. It reminds me of how C.S. Lewis says we ought to, he says someone that's really participating in a church ceremony, right? It's like someone that knows the steps of the dance already. You've done it so much that you forget yourself in it and you're completely present in the moment. And you're experiencing something new because you already know what the steps are going to be. It's like an actor who knows his or her lines can just be present as the character and not be worrying about the lines, The normal and deliberate practice of introversion, on the contrary, is tightly bound up with the sense of divine eminence. Its emphasis is on the indwelling God, who may be found by a journey towards the center, on the conviction, indeed, that angels and archangels are with us, but he is more truly our own, who is not only with us, but in us. Okay, so contemplation, taking that term in its widest sense, as embracing the whole mystic art, establishes communion between the soul and the absolute by way of these two complementary modes of apprehending that which is one. A, the usually uncontrollable, definitely outgoing, ecstatic experience, the attainment of pure being, or flight to God, and B, the more controllable, ingoing experience, the breaking down of the barrier between the surface self and the deeper levels of personality, where God is met and known in our nothingness. And a mysterious fusion of divine and human life takes place. The one, says the Christian mystic, is the going forth to the Father. The other is the marriage with the Son. Both are operated by the indwelling spirit, the spark of the soul. Yet it is probable, in spite of the spatial language which the mystics always use concerning them, that these two experiences, in their most sublime forms, are but opposite aspects of one whole, the complementary terms of a higher synthesis beyond our span. In that consummation of love which Roisebrook has called, quote, the peace of the summits. Maybe it's like this. These two meet. They meet. Then distinctions between inward and outward, near and far, cease to have any meaning in the dim silence where lovers lose themselves. To mount to God, says a tract attributed to Albert the Great, is to enter into oneself. For he who inwardly entereth and intimately penetrateth into himself gets above and beyond himself and truly mounts up to God, up to this height. Says Towler of this ineffable meeting place, which is to the intellect an emptiness, and to the heart a fulfillment of all desire. Oh, that's such a good way to put it. Quote, all there is so still and mysterious and so desolate, for there is nothing there but God only, and nothing strange, ellipsis. This wilderness is the quiet desert of the Godhead, into which he leads all who are to receive this inspiration of God, now or in eternity. From this, that was the end of quote, from this, quote, quiet desert, this still plain of being, so near to her, though she is far from it, the normal self is separated by all the, quote, unquiet desert of sensual existence. Yet it stretches through and in her the stuff of reality, the very ground of her being, since it is, in Julian's word, Julian of Norwich is right, the substance of all that is, linking that being at once with the universe and with God. Quote, God is near us, but we are far from him. God is within, we are without. God is at home, we are in the far country, said Meister Eckhart. I just put that on Instagram yesterday. Yeah, I think it was yesterday. I searched for Meister Eckhart, and one of my friends came up, and I took his post, and it just has that quote, and it has a log cabin on it. If you look at my Instagram, I made a reel of it, and it says, God is at home, and a little sun I put behind it popping up, and I have Arrested Development song, Tennessee. I have her singing, won't you help me, won't you let me, won't you help me understand, take me home. She's like, take me home, home to another place. I didn't know. Of all the Meister Eckhart quotes, right? I just was looking for him, and my intuition, I wanted to find, and then my friends, he's mindfulness man, this guy named Chris, and he's Buddhist, he's not Christian or anything, and he had this Meister Eckhart, and all these hashtags were like, and it was like 2 days ago maybe. If I didn't do it Sunday, I think maybe Saturday. But I just did it. It's like, anyway. My Instagram is Dr. Cheryl Meyer, so feel free to follow me there too. Anyway. I'm always just wanting to express this so people can experience it on other levels. Everywhere I go, I'm doing that. So, whatever. Okay, and so I was like, I feel like I know this quote. And then it got to that part. Okay, so I'll read it again. God is near us, but we are far from him. God is within, we are without. God is at home, we are in the far country, says Meister Eckhart, struggling to express the nature of this, quote, intelligible where. Clearly, if the self is ever to become aware of it, definite work must be undertaken, definite powers of perception must be trained, and the consciousness which has been evolved to meet the exigencies of the world of becoming must be initiated into that world of being from which it came forth. I could cry. All this stuff is coming up with that. I hope for you too. Must be trained, and the consciousness which has been evolved to meet the exigencies of the world of becoming must be initiated into the world of being from which it came forth. Plato long ago defined the necessity of such a perception and the nature of that art of contemplation by which the soul can feed upon the real, when he said in one of his most purely mystical passages, quote, when the soul returns into itself and reflects, it passes into, ellipsis, the region of that which is pure and everlasting, immortal and unchangeable, and feeling itself kindred thereto, it dwells there under its own control, and has rest from its wanderings." End quote. The contemplation of Plato and of the Platonic schools generally, however, is a purely intellectual activity. With him, the head and not the heart is the meeting place between man and the real. Anciently, says Augustine Baker, I guess a different Augustine, quote, "There was a certain kind of false contemplation, which we may call philosophical, practiced by some learned heathens of old, and imitated by some in these days, which hath for its last and best end only that the perfection of knowledge, and a delightful complacency in it. To this rank of philosophical contemplations may be referred those scholastic wits which spend much time in the study and subtle examination of the mysteries of faith, and have not for their end the increasing of divine love in their hearts." This is so important to understand. So it's not, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, will and strength. The first commandment. It's just this contemplation and wanting to know knowledge. And it's kind of like you get highs from that and you forget, no, wait, we're here to know and love God. And whether you get highs or not, we're not doing these videos for highs, you know what I mean? Anyway, we cannot long read the works of the mystics without coming across descriptions, often first-hand descriptions, of great psychological interest of the process through which the self must pass, the discipline which it must undertake in the course of acquiring the art of contemplation. Most of those descriptions differ as to detail, as to the divisions adopted, the emotions experienced, the number of degrees through which the subject passes from the first painful attempt to gather up its faculties to the supreme point at which it feels itself to be lost in God. In each there is that quality of uniqueness which is inherent in every expression of life. In each the temperamental bias and analytical powers of the writer have exerted a further modifying influence. All, however, describe a connected experience, the progressive concentration of the entire self under the spur of love upon the contemplation of transcendental reality. As the mystic way involves transcendence of character, going beyond your character, the movement of the whole man to higher levels of vitality, his attainment of freedom, so the ascent of the ladder of contemplation involves such a transcendence or movement to high levels of liberty of his perceptive powers. The steps of the ladder, the substance of the progressive exercises undertaken by the developing self, its education in the art of contemplation, are called in technical terms the degrees of orison, or sometimes by an unfortunate looseness of the English language, the degrees of prayer. Okay, so orison is more specific than prayer. Prayer, as understood of the multitude, with all its implications of conventional piety, formality, detailed petition, a definite something asked for, and a definite duty done by means of extemporary or traditional allocutions addressed to the anthropomorphic deity of popular religion, I love how she put that, does not really suggest the nature of those supersensual activities which the mystics mean to express in their use of the term. This is like what the Desert Fathers talk about, Hezekiah, an ascetical life and awareness and concentration and what is the word? Alertness. It's like an alert kind of prayer. Orison has nothing in common with petition. It's not articulate. It has no forms. It is, says the mirror of St. Edmund, not else but yearning of soul. On the psychological side, it is a steady discipline imposed upon the mystic's rich subliminal mind, a slow preparation of the channels in which that deeper consciousness is to flow, a reducing to some sort of order, a making effective for life of those involuntary states of passivity, rapture, and intuition, which are the characteristic ways in which an uncontrolled, uncultivated genius for the absolute breaks out. To the subject himself, however, it seems rather a free and mutual act of love, a strange, splendid, supernatural intercourse between the soul and the divine, or some aspect of the divine, a wordless conversation in heaven. That's awesome. A wordless conversation in heaven. In some of its degrees, it is a placid, trustful waiting upon messages from without. In others, it is an inarticulate communion, a wordless rapture, a silent gazing upon God. The mystics have exhausted all the resources of all tongues in their efforts to tell us of the reward which await those who will undertake this most sublime and difficult of arts. As we come to know our friends better by having intercourse with them, so by this deliberate intercourse, the self enters more and more deeply into the heart of reality. As we have more dinner parties with specific families or whatever, we get to know them more intimately, Climbing like Dante step by step up the ladder of contemplation, it comes at last to the Empyrean, ivi e perfetta matura ed intura ciascuna Dea Santa. Oh, good. She translates this. Journeys end in lovers' meeting. Wow. The true end of Orison, like the true end of that mysticism which it cultivates, is the supreme meeting between the lover and beloved, between God and the soul. Its method is the method of the mystic life, transcendence, a gradual approximation of the contemplative self to reality, the production within it of those conditions in which union can take place. This entails a concentration, a turning inwards of all those faculties which the normal self has been accustomed to turn outwards and fritter upon the manifold illusions of daily life. It means, during the hours of introversion, a retreat from and refusal of the many, in order that the mind may be able to apprehend the one. Right? I was just getting that on the way here. I was saying, as long as you're listening to all these things outside and the mind inside and the egotism and just pulled away, then it's like, you can't know my love because you keep running to all these other, quote, lovers, Because I was thinking of the idea of, someone you want to love and they don't want to love you. Someone you just feel called to love. But then it's like you have to, know when to hold them, know when to fold them, like know when to walk away and know when to run. But it's like, if they keep running over to one lover after another, one person, one girlfriend or boyfriend, whoever, after another, and you're just like, you can ask, like, why is this manifesting in my outer world? It's a repetition. It can be, I'm going into my psychology mind, a repetition of your childhood, of wanting your parents, but they're never available, and just finding a repetition of that. But it was like asking God, how am I like that? How am I like that to you? How can I stop running after all my mind saying, oh, you need to pay attention to this. You need to be worried about that. No, Jesus says, do not worry about tomorrow. Don't worry about your clothes. Don't worry about all this other stuff. It takes our attention off from God, What are we here for? Behold, and I'll wrap this up. Behold, says Boheme, if thou desirest to see God's light in thy soul and be divinely illuminated and conducted, this is the short way that thou art to take, not to let the eye of the Spirit enter matter or fill itself with anything whatever, either in heaven or earth, but to let it enter a naked faith into the light of the majesty. Wow. What this opening of the spiritual eye is, says Hilton, the greatest scholar on earth cannot imagine by his wit, nor show fully by his tongue, for it cannot be gotten by study, nor by man's industry alone, but principally by grace of the Holy Ghost, and with human industry. I am afraid to speak anything of it, for me thinketh that I cannot. It passeth my assay, be able to express. And my lips are unclean. Nevertheless, because it seems to me that love asketh, yea, love biddeth that I should, therefore shall I say little more of it, as I hope love teacheth. This opening of the spiritual eye is that lightsome darkness and rich knot that I spake of before. And it may be called purity of spirit and spiritual rest, inward stillness and peace of conscience, highness of thought and loneliness of soul, a lively feeling of grace and privity of heart, the watchful sleep of the spouse, and tasting of heavenly savor, burning in love and shining in light, the entry of contemplation and reforming in feeling, ellipsis. These by diverse in show of words, yet are they all one in meaning and verity and truth, All right. Human industry, says Hilton here, must be joined to grace. That's always what I was wondering, because I don't know how to tell people about this sometimes. Because, not everyone claims to be the same faith, but it's like God gives his general grace to all, and then the Holy Spirit does something. But I like what John Butler says, grace is spiritual sunshine. And so, the Holy Spirit, I don't know how the Holy Spirit works in this life, but who am I to limit the Holy Spirit of divine love? All right, much love. Thanks for being here. Make sure to like and comment and share, and, just comment your favorite quote, or comment something you learned, or your favorite 80s song or classical song, or whatever. It just helps the video go out. Mystic quote or something, so that, whatever, it doesn't matter. YouTube pushes the video out to other people when we do that. So that's one way you can give back, to this discipline that I'm doing for all of us. All right. I wish you so much love.